Welcome back to this second part of Murder with Friends. Today we're breaking down the, as of now, unsolved murder of Kathy Page. And where you're picking up with us, we're going to be going through the list of suspects. Now, obviously, there is one major person of interest, but a lot of people have been questioned in regards to this murder. But before we toss into our conversation, let's take a look at this video element.
Somebody must know something. 27 years after Kathy's lifeless body was discovered, Vidor Police Chief Rod Carroll is banking on someone coming forward with information. He explained to the Daily Mail, quote, "I can tell you right now, the individual who is the person of interest, he's not the only one who knows what happened that night. He's told somebody. I have no doubt he has told somebody. And now my question is, does anyone have a conscience enough to come forth and tell us what he's told them? It doesn't take much sleuthing to know who the person of interest is in this case. All signs, both literally and figuratively, point to Kathy's husband at the time, Steve Page. He was found liable for her death in a 2000 civil trial, but never faced any criminal charges. Has he gotten away with murder? What is the case against Steve Page?"
So that will sort of jump off our conversation. Obviously, there is a major suspect at play who has been named by the family of Kathy Page. But there are some other theories, one that he has asserted that I want to talk about with you today, Mark, and see if there is much, if there's if there's any rubber hits the road with this. Here's what Steve Page thinks happened. He says that she was getting involved, Kathy was getting involved, having an affair with someone that was high up and powerful in Beaumont, a nearby town. And perhaps the Beaumont Mafia took her out. And he said that he had been receiving threatening phone calls saying that whatever happened to Kathy would happen to him. I present that to you. Thoughts, questions, comments, concerns?
Well, it's nice that he has a theory because he clearly did it, as we'll get to maybe later, I think. I mean, you're in denial of a lot of facts to suggest that the Beaumont Mafia might have done it. For primarily, the fact is there really isn't a Beaumont Mafia. It doesn't exist. So
I haven't found a shred of evidence that would even, that it's ever existed, that there's a Beaumont Mafia.
So you can hang it as one more lie he's telling in this entire scenario. Again, I give him credit for having slapped together some BS, which he, where he's got a Goodfellas, Godfather, Mafia story, and he slaps it onto again this case. But it does feel slapped on. There's no. There's just no credibility to that story.
Yeah, and I think what he's sort of using in that is that in the civil suit and in the investigation, it was known and it has been established and corroborated that Kathy did have a boyfriend in Beaumont that she was seeing. And this person submitted himself for a polygraph.
Something which Steve Page did not.
Something that Steve Page did not, and he was questioned by authorities and he has been since ruled out. Now what's interesting though is that his name has always been omitted from any of the case files.
And that was suggested because maybe he was married. I'm sorry, but
right? No, that perhaps he was married, or perhaps he was a high-up Beaumont official. So by that omission, which we don't really know why, Steve Page seems to have sort of used that to spin his own story. Because we can't say, oh, like there's no way that John Doe that Kathy was having an affair with was involved with this Beaumont Mafia, because there is this big question mark over the identity of this person. He was able to sort of spin that and say, well, maybe they're concealing the identity of someone in witness protection, like in the mob or something like that. But I really just don't think there's any water. Like it just doesn't hold any water. I'm using all these, I feel like now that we're covering like a Texas case, I'm like, rubber hits the road, doesn't hold any water.
No, it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense, but there is a pretty substantial, if circumstantial, case to Steve Page's guilt. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things you touched on in part one about the suspicious activity that he engaged with, that even investigators that he was acquainted with said that's kind of strange. Emotions aside, what were some of his actions?
Well, again, it's against a backdrop of them splitting up. They were a couple for a while. By the way, they met, I believe it was an affair they had, and that led to their marriage. So it's not as though he's any stranger or she's any stranger to that kind of thing. But anyway, as we mentioned, their divorce was imminent. Their separation was ongoing. This was day 2 or 3 of it. And so he's feeling that loss. So it's against that backdrop that we see these things happen. He's aware that she's going out. He's stepped in to help her to watch the kids. The things that stuck out to me were associated with the crime scene. And
well, the alleged crime scene, because they never established that was they never established where Kathy was murdered. Now there is a big case that we kind of know where it is. Maybe you can talk about that.
Well, when he was talking to cops, he even mentions blood that was probably. He said, "I don't want you." Does he say, "I don't want you to search the"?
He told an acquaintance of his. It might have been a family member, because I know that the Page family really sticks together throughout this case, and the Fultons stick together. And
yeah, why can't I get a family that would cover a murder for me?
Yeah,
my family would just.
They'd be like, he did it.
They would sing like canaries.
What he says to someone along the lines that goes on record in the civil trial is that he doesn't want police searching the house because they will find blood from Kathy shaving her legs in the living room. Now, there's a podcast that I was using in my research for this that I thought was just absolutely awesome. It was called Southern Fried True Crime, and she just says that. He says, I don't want the police coming in because they'll find blood in the living room for where Kathy was shaving her legs. And she just paused and she goes, ladies, how often do you shave your legs in the living room? Fair. Like, I don't even shave my legs that often, and I've never done it in the living room. I just know that why would you do that? You do it in the shower. It's so weird.
Yeah, he'd already concocted, again, another crappy story as to why her blood is in the living room. Mm-hmm. But again, because the crime scene was never established, and as Grace says, there was no subpoena to search ever served, the cops, I shouldn't say ever, I mean years later they searched it. But in a contemporaneous way, we end up never knowing about that blood in a way that matters in terms of evidence. We know the reference. Now, why so much about the blood? Because he enlisted his family to help clean up this stain, which he said was from a spill of some oil.
Grease, yeah. There was a grease spill. And this scene plays out just really very eerie to me, which is that a member of Kathy's family stops by the house. I mean, you kind of know how it is after the loss of a loved one. I can only imagine what it would be like in the case of a murder, but people are coming in and out of the house, like taking care of belongings, bringing over food. And she comes over and she notices that their fans pointed at the carpet and there's this really strong smell. She asks Steve about it. He says, oh, I spilled some grease, so I'm just cleaning out the carpet, like a deep clean of the carpet. Very weird. Then later on, Kathy's parents come through and the whole family is working on one area of the carpet. The whole Page family is working on one area of the carpet, just really scrubbing it clean, again, because of this grease spill. But Kathy's father says it was just so strange given the location of where the carpet would be and where like the grease would have had to have come from. It didn't really make sense. And he has said that that's for him when he felt that he knew that Steve was guilty.
Well, there was no trail of grease, is really what you're suggesting. You would have had
an isolated grease spill?
An isolated grease spill in the living room. You would have a trail of some kind. So yeah, it didn't make sense. The other thing that was consistent with that sort of evidence was the fact that a minister who arrived on the scene because this family is in this crisis, right? This minister testified to the fact that the laundry machine was on the spin cycle. There's a lot of
early in the morning,
exactly,
after Kathy's body was found.
And there's a lot of testimony and in evidence to the cops about the fact that he was washing his clothes early that morning, because family, as you can imagine, did arrive early in the morning. And so there were stories from, and again, they kind of split along family lines, the fact that he was washing his clothes. And so the only neutral party, and then Steve's family said, oh, we don't remember him washing his clothes. No, he wasn't washing his clothes. And then the only neutral party that they could find was this minister who said, oh yeah, when I was there, there was the spin cycle of the laundry machine was actually running.
Yeah, it is sort of eerie because you just have both sides that it's tell totally different stories, and so someone is lying.
And so as you put this together and try to make it cohere, you end up with these things that do begin to point to something happening in that house.
Yes.
And Steve trying to rid himself and the house of that evidence that's sticking to him. And again, I remind everybody that, you know, she's found. Clearly, it's a staged scene, but staged in this ham-fisted way.
Yeah.
Not wearing jewelry or makeup. That's huge to me. You know, she wouldn't be out without that.
Yeah, everyone that knows her has said that she had this nightly routine where she would shower before bed and take off her makeup and take off her jewelry, so that she was found without those items. It's characteristic that this didn't happen after her night out after her night with her boyfriend, that she must have gone home and changed. Another piece of evidence that I think is crucial and incredibly frustrating is that it is found in her autopsy, which, by the way, Steve Page didn't authorize, but her father did consent to, that she had sex the night of the murder with someone, with a partner who had a vasectomy. Now, her boyfriend, this is a weird thing to me too, her boyfriend says that they did have relations that night, but he has not had a vasectomy, so he was ruled out. Steve Page has had a vasectomy, so his sperm totally matches what they were looking for. He then admitted that they did have sex before she went out that night, so this would have been maybe 10:30, 11 before she went out for the evening, and that the place where they had sex was in the exact same spot on the carpet where her blood would have been found because of shaving her legs, and the exact same spot where the grease spilled. It's just way too many coincidences.
Thank you. I was just about to drop that. To me, that's the bomb. I mean, I don't think that, although I suppose you could say there are all kinds of explosions from bombs throughout this case, but I don't think it's consistent with who she is and where they are in their relationship, that they had sex that night, and then she goes out and has sex with her new boyfriend, the guy she'd been seeing. It just doesn't track. And then, where they had sex, the entire story really only holds together if you accept the fact that she came home after I guess we'll get to that in the next, the actual.
Oh yeah, we're gonna share our theories on what we think happened. But
because I do think the story hangs together tightly when you build a scenario that does make sense and there's no evidence that sticks out. So.
Yeah, and I mean, and for me, sort of for lack of a better expression, the nail in the coffin for Steve's guilt for me is that he was caught on video desecrating the grave of Kathy Page. The family had noticed that her flowers on her grave kept getting knocked over and were just getting tarnished and stuff, and so they put up a hidden camera to see who was doing it, and they were shocked to see that it was caught on camera, that it was Steve Page. When he was asked about it, he said that he was just so upset because of her affair and how the murder had really ruined his life and thrown his own moral fiber into question or whatever. But you got it. I mean, who does that to the grave of someone who'd been murdered? The mother of your children. Are you out of your mind?
Yeah. So in this process of grieving, the fact that you could desecrate the grave, look, you're right. It's one more piece of evidence. Maybe it is the last piece that you need, but it's weird. It comes after the fact, and yet it does underscore the fact that Steve Page killed her.
And so then the ultimate question is, as the question that we see on these billboards, is who is responsible? And James Fulton, Kathy's father, seems to think that there is a lot of responsibility on the police department, on the local police department. So are they responsible? And what is our theory on what happened that night? We're going to tell you all about it in part 3.